Welcome to the very first episode of the Chair-isma podcast. I'm Francine Lasky, a former member and Chicago chair since 2019. I created this podcast because the wisdom within our chair community is too valuable to stay hidden in one-on-one conversations and once-a-year moments at Chair World. Each episode is like sitting down to coffee with a fellow chair where curiosity runs deep and wisdom flows generously. Ready whenever you need inspiration, solutions, or reassurance. Every time I talk with another chair, I discover something that transforms how I show up for my members. Use these 20 to 30-minute episodes to get yourself in chair stance, listening on your way to a meeting, or find support when you're up late at your computer worrying about a member. My goal is that you'll find what you need in these conversations. When we inspire each other, we create ripples of positive change, and we can literally change the world. I just finished a fascinating conversation with Danielle Baldwin. Danielle has been a chair since 2018 in the San Diego area, where she has an SB, a CE, and a key group, and she serves on the Vistage faculty for new chairs. After being blown away at Danielle's Chair World presentation on inspiration, I sent Danielle some handmade thank you cards, and we shared that we both spend too much money at hobby stores being crafty. There's so much good stuff in our discussion that this first episode's a bit longer than the rest of the season. Danielle will give you great insight into the mindset for times that you win, times that you bomb, and times where you feel utterly defeated. Don't miss Danielle and my discussion about how to manage discomfort in the room. Check out how Danielle uses 6 hats. She even adds a 7th. And you can find her framework in our show notes at francinelasky.com. Let's dive in. Hi, welcome to Chair-isma. And today we're with Danielle Baldwin. Hi, welcome, Danielle.
Thank you.
We're going to start off with kind of a get to know you exercise.
I love it.
None of us are all one thing. I believe you are a little bit something and a little bit something else. So I'm going to test these ratios with you. So if I say, Danielle, dog or cat? And I would say I'm 80% dog, 20% cat. So we'll start off. Danielle, dog or cat?
90-10, diehard dog person.
Diehard dog. Coffee or tea?
Oh my goodness. Even like 98 coffee.
Got it.
Yeah.
Text or call?
You know, Francine, these are like, I feel like I am very one-sided, like 98% text to like, please don't call me. Like, please don't. Yeah.
Morning person or night owl?
I would say 70-30 morning.
Sweet like ice cream or salty like French fries?
Ooh, that's a toss-up. I'd say 60 sweet, 40 salty.
Time or money?
99% time, 1% money.
Plan ahead or spontaneous?
Is this how I wish I was, or is this how I actually...
That's totally up to you.
How I actually am, the controller in me loves to plan ahead, so I would say 80%. I would love to be more carefree.
Ideal ratio. I'll let you do that.
50-50.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Concert or movie?
98% concert. I spend the large majority of my summers either at baseball games or at concerts.
We'll get to baseball games. All right, here's the most important question. Are you ready?
Dun dun.
What is your peanut butter to jelly ratio?
I think it's 1-to-1.
Really? 50-50.
But not crunchy. We're not doing the crunchy thing. We're doing the smooth thing.
Danielle, what is your why? Why do you do this work?
I do this work because I have a passion for helping people. I wound up here by accident. I think a lot of us as chairs too. And I feel like this is my highest and best good.
Tell us a little bit about the accident.
So I think like many of us, I grew up in the corporate world, right? And everything was breaking for me at once. My body was breaking, my marriage was breaking, the job was breaking. And I took a year off and I finished a memoir, writing one. And was trying to figure out like who I wanted to be when I grew up. And when somebody would ask me, what do you miss? And I would say, I miss like developing my people. And so I started doing some executive coaching, and somebody came to me and said, have you heard of Vistage? And I was like, no, I'm good. Nope, haven't, not, nope. And at my like smallest core, at the smallest atom of Danielle, I'm a writer, right? Like I came out of the womb like that. So someone had the presence of mind to say to me, Dee, Vistage is kind of like a read and critique group, except it's for CEOs. And I was like, oh, hey, like I know what that is, right? And I know the impact that read and critique groups have had on my work forever. And so it was really compelling to me. And then I sat down and sat through a meeting and was like, oh my gosh, like when you look at doing the help and the work that you do with just two people with private coaching, and then you look at the solutions and the love and the support and just the entire universe of what Vistage is, I was sold from that moment.
That is so interesting you say that, because I think you're right. I think everybody's story has a similar with a put in a different noun. For me, it was Vistage is a liberal arts education for business. And that was my best time ever, was in college in liberal arts. You can go whatever subject you want, go deep, go in, have those people around you, put in reading critique group and put in liberal arts. For me, that was absolutely my story as well.
I love that.
So what would your members say is your superpower?
I recently asked them, because I'm in the process of redoing my website, and I hadn't asked them. And they say my superpower is kind of two things. One is listening and being like empathetic and supportive, but also I'm very direct. So as much as I would like to say that living in California since 1997, that I have mellowed, you can take the girl out of Jersey, you can't take the Jersey out of the girl. When I'm interviewing potential members, I say to them, my job as your chair is to make you feel safe and uncomfortable at the same time. That is what if we are trying to figure out how this is supposed to feel, this is it. And my members, almost to a person, were like, that's it. You make us feel very safe and very loved and uncomfortable. You're constantly pushing.
Yeah. Would you think that's your superpower? That's what they think is your superpower. Would you say the same thing?
I'm wildly curious. I think to be a good chair, you need to be wildly curious. I would definitely say it's listening, but I also think it's translation. And what I mean by that is I love, as you can imagine, a writer, I love using imagery. And so like this morning, I was in a one-to-one and we were talking about leadership. And the way that I explain leadership is a person that's not a leader will get up on top of a fire truck and yell fire at the top of their lungs. Fire! A leader gets on top of the fire truck and yells fire, and then they get the hose. So it's like taking those types of concepts and twisting them just a little bit so my members can get a different view on something, right? And that can be anything. So I think that's my superpower because it kind of ties into writing. But I agree with the listening. I didn't really think it was accountability, to be honest, but apparently that's not what they say.
I think it's what they value, right? It's you see what you bring and they take what they value.
Yeah.
Right? What's the most innovative format or exercise that you've done recently? Something that maybe other people could use, or something that you've used that have been really popular with your members?
In instances in which it's like to be or not to be, like to do or not to do, right? Like little Yoda-esque, we will do de bono 6 hats. And my group freaking loves de bono 6 hats. Each hat represents a different question. So what are all the reasons why you would pursue this? Great. So members go up and they use Post-it notes. So it brings energy in the room because they're up and moving. So if they bring de bono 6 hats back to their own organization, not only is it a great brainstorming tool, but you can see how each of your leadership team members, like what's their go-to? Are they giving you a million reasons why this can't be done? And then they're coming up with like one reason why you should. Okay, right? Like maybe that's your Eeyore. And then you got Sally Sunshine. She's going to tell you 40 reasons why you can, right? So de bono 6 hats for me is a really fun one that my group really likes.
Awesome. Do you have a write-up on that? Can I post it on the website? I'm interested in how you make a safe space and yet make them uncomfortable. And the thing that I'm interested in is your balance on that, right? What's my ambition for them versus their ambition for them? How do you think about that as a chair?
I've learned some lessons the hard way. I've pushed people too far. And what I remind myself in those moments is that I need to meet people where they're at, not where what I think is best for them or where I think they should be. I am doing a better job checking in with people. So when the issue processing gets deep and I'm noticing physical body language, it's indicating a higher degree of discomfort, right? Because I'm keeping an eye not only on the energy of the room, right? Because you can kind of feel it, but I'm paying very close attention to what's going on in the hot seat. And if I'm noticing anything in the member's demeanor, right? They're starting to shift more, the body language shifts, they're pulling back from the table, something that's indicating that they're not feeling safe, I'll time us out. I'll say, how are you feeling? Are you comfortable with the line of questioning? I think this is very valuable. We're not going to take you to a place where you're not willing to go, right? And if the member gives permission, then we continue on. And a lot of the times the member will say, yeah, wow, geez, Louise, this is really freaking uncomfortable, but I think I'm willing to go there, right? And every now and then we'll hit a nerve and they'll say, I don't know that I want to go any further with this. And then that's okay, right? And that's kind of where we stop. And then I always follow up. If there is a deep issue process on my drive home, I'm always calling the members, checking in. How are you feeling now? Where are you? Right? Because some of them have vulnerability hangovers, just like Brene Brown teaches us.
Yeah.
And so kind of making them feel better about that. But it's also, again, just being conscious of what is the best for the member in the moment and not what I think is best. Right. And also knowing like we have years with these people. We don't need to make a breakthrough in a day. Right. We have many, many months and many, many years to be able to continue to have the conversations. So Stacey McKibben is a Vistage speaker. And one of the things that I love that she says specifically about conflict is you don't need to have the entire conversation in one sitting. Like who made that rule? That's not a thing. You can space it out over time.
And that's very hard with, especially one of my groups has a lot of big disc Ds in there. They like to go straight for it. They fire the questions away. It's more about them than it is about the member at times. And to kind of bring that back is more difficult. Do you have any techniques you use when the group gets really kind of in a feeding frenzy?
Yeah, I just time it out. You can feel the energy shift, like the hair on the back of your neck goes up. Or again, you're watching the member and they're starting to get shifty. Then I will time us out and maybe I'll do a recap. All right, guys, time out. This is what we know so far. What else are we curious about? Or if I'm trying to get a question out and trying not to ask it, I wonder who else is curious about blah, 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 right? Who wants to ask a question? But if I feel something's going off the rails, I will time us out and just either redirect the conversation or just slow it down. I have one member, I love him, but he cannot ask questions. Like he must solution. And so there was one issue processing where I banned him. I was like, I know the next thing out of your mouth is not a question. I know that it's a solution. And so I see your hand up and I'm not calling on you, man. And everybody's laughing. He's laughing. And he's gotten way better. Like, if you can't play the way that we're playing, I'm not going to let you play.
We call them questolutions. Like, is that a questolution?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how do you foster connections among your members? Inside and outside the group?
Inside the group, I'm very conscious of seating arrangement. So like the one that I can remember most recently is we were talking about grieving and I had a widow and a widower. So I wanted to make sure they were together, right? Like that was something that would be important. You know, some members are tighter than others. I'm going to split y'all up. So that's how I kind of manage it in the room. Outside of the room, all of my groups are either in triads or pairs. And they'll either get homework based on what we did in the meeting. Like we had the speaker and these were your to-dos and you need to follow up and check in with your person. And then in the next meeting, we will do a readout. How was your conversation? What did you talk about? I feel like one of the things you just said that is so interesting to me And I think is just a sign of the times. And why Vistage is so valuable is a sense of community we get, right? Because I think religious institutions used to play that part in our society. And this is not political. People are looking for connection in different ways. So when you think about how you build community, right? You asked me this beautiful question. What are some of your best practices? How are you doing that right now?
We have rituals in our group. So something I inherited when I took over the group and what I learned as a member. And so those rituals are all designed around building community. So there's a spirit of sharing part. So every meeting, we have a small section that is something you can take away, a book, a movie, a podcast, anything that you can think of. And that, if you learn nothing else during the day, you've taken away a movie, you've made a connection with somebody that goes, I love their choice in movies. I'm totally going to watch that. There's a Priya Parker also mentioned it. Like, if you just get one thing, like you feel connected to the people around you. I also do the pods, and I'm struggling right now because they're so connected as pods, they don't want to separate. And as long as we don't have clicks, I think I'm okay with that. Like that connection gets deeper and deeper. So I think rituals, things that we do every time that people can expect, especially when each of those rituals has a specific purpose for building that community. And I'll share that on the podcast too. I've got kind of my write-up as to why we do each and every one of them. So
I love that.
Can you share an experience that fundamentally changed your role as the chair? Maybe something you thought you were supposed to be that you weren't, or something that happened to you that really kind of made you rethink what that role was?
As a facilitator, we're meant to guide the conversation. We're meant to keep on time. We're creating and holding this safe container. But I had this fear about kind of letting go of that. When I'm facilitating, I like to be able to see shore at all times, right? I'm out on the boat and I get that and I'm cool with that. But like, what is it like to facilitate and not see shore? You're just out there treading. Like you roll into a meeting and there is no agenda. And what I realized, which sounds silly, but is so true, is my version of a great meeting is not my members. It's not. And so when I debrief the day for me, I am giving myself like C-. And when my members are debriefing the day, like the day is about so much more. And we know this conceptually, but like than agenda or what we're doing. And so kind of giving myself permission to just like let a meeting go and see where it went naturally on its own was terrifying and freeing and an interesting perspective change for me that I didn't anticipate.
We ask our members to do that, right? We ask them to let their people lead. And then we are so reluctant to let that happen as well because of the same reasons. Failure, it could go south. You have shared with me that you're very creative. What's your most fun intersection between being creative and crafty and being a Vistage chair?
That's a great question. The room itself is very creative. So I'm the person that brings the toys, and we always have pipe cleaners and we have Play-Doh and we have all of that to make sure any type of learner feels comfortable in the room, kinesthetic, visual, audio. In terms of how else creativity shows up in chairing for me, I think I'm getting more comfortable bringing that in more in terms of what I'm willing to let go of and play with. Because when I'm creative, I'm far less structured. Don't worry about failing, right? Like so many of those limitations go away. Well, just being willing to try new things, I think. And I'm getting bolder with that. And I like that. And I will tell my group, this might stink. We might do this exercise and you might think to yourself, D, this is so dumb. And that's fine. We don't ever have to do it again, but we're going to try it today. And normally they'll go with me.
I'm using AI right now as a brainstorming partner. Like I'll come up with an idea and then I'll put it in. I'll be like, I already thought of the first one, but I never thought of the second point or the third point, right? And it is a game changer.
It really is. Like one of the things when I'm reading this book, right, I had some members that were dealing with like kind of right in front of them, not quitting their business, but quitting different things. And so I put it into AI, right? Put it in ChatGPT. I'm reading this book by Annie Duke. It's about quitting. I need to make a 30-minute exercise that's relevant to a peer group of CEOs. And like, I was like, okay. Or
it got you 85% of the way there.
that is 100% right.
And what's your self-talk when it doesn't go well? Right. So somebody's listening to this podcast. It's 2:00 in the morning. The meeting was yesterday, and they're like, "Oh my God, I just lost everybody." They hated that. Like, what advice do you give them?
The advice I give new chairs, and I try and give myself, which we always know is if you're not bombing every now and then, you're not pushing hard enough. Right. Again, we want comfort and discomfort. So if it's so comfortable that the meetings are super predictable or we know what's going to happen and so on and so forth. And then I think for us as chairs, and I hate that this is the way that life is, but like you kind of got a belly flop sometimes. Like the whole like one ham, like smack in the water. And that's how we learn, right?
You learn more from a failure than you do from a success. Oh
yeah, and that is great. It's a great adage, and it feels like crap in the moment, right? You're like, oh, but it is what it is, right? And I think what I try and flip it into is good for you for trying something new, right? And not everything's going to go well, nor should it. And again, like the belly flops are an indication that you're pushing the group, you're pushing yourself, you're trying out new skills as a chair. Like I think the other reason we're all in this is we love to learn. And the way that we learn best is by trying.
What's a piece of advice, since you're on the faculty of Vistage and you deal with new chairs all the time, what's the one piece of advice, the one lesson that you teach that you think most people ignore to their own peril?
It's all in mindset. And it's my favorite quote. It's Henry Ford, which I loosely translate to, if you think you can, you can. And if you think you can, you're right. And that goes to building a group. It goes to facilitating members. It goes to literally everything. Mindset. The good news, you have a choice. You want to hear the bad noise? You have a choice. So mindset is one of those things that's so tricky. I still struggle with it. I had like a little mini meltdown about it last week. Everybody doubts themselves. I think imposter syndrome impacts 99% of the population, just in different pockets, right? I had so much imposter syndrome when I came in because I've never been a CEO. And I'm like rolling into this. And, I didn't just fall off the turnip truck. I got some brains in my head, but what? Because chairing is about challenge. Chairing is about listening and loving. Like those are the things we lean into. So yeah, I think it's just about being your own biggest cheerleader. And I feel like that's like a lifelong lesson for me. And for a lot of us, because it's so easy. It's so easy for me to be like, Francine, you are such a badass. Like, holy crap, I watch you chair and I love what you do. And I love the fact that you're doing a podcast and I love that you're so great. Like I can say that for days, but it's really hard to do it for ourselves. So yeah, if you think you can, you can. If you think you can't, you're right.
Would you be willing to share with us what your freak out session was about last week?
Absolutely. I had a former member post on LinkedIn. She got a new coach. She left Vistage, got a new coach. We had worked together for years. And you feel like you're making a positive impact on somebody. And she did this glowing review about how her company's been around for a specific amount of time and how helpful all these other people were. And then, right, like, then you're not mentioned. And you're like, I thought I was helping. And then you realize, A, it's not about you. B, it's a good reminder that as chairs, which can be rather lonely, we're so much better off if we can get our self-worth from ourselves and not base it based on member feedback, on chair feedback, on Vistage feedback, on anybody's feedback. So it's a good reminder for that. Because if you allow that story to spiral, am I really a good chair? Did I do well by her? What does this mean about my effectiveness? Do my other members think this? Like it's just story. All story. There's not a shred of fact in there. It's this post. about how she's celebrating something that is super cool. And that's it. The end. Period. And so it's just pulling myself out of story. Like I got pretty good in there, right?
That's amazing. And remember, you are a great storyteller. That's what got you into this in the first place, right? So the stories you make up about yourself are believable and they're thoughtful and they're amazing. You just have to say, what really is the story that's there?
So what I ask myself is this: what's most helpful to believe? I can switch the judge off with that question. If I ask what's most helpful to believe, then it helps me get out of story faster.
How do you measure the impact that you're having on your members' businesses? How do you use it for both recruiting to say, why should I, choose you and choose Vistage?
I know that there are a bunch of different ways, and I know a lot of chairs will point to their member awards or their growth. I don't do that as much because that's not always what's most important. I can have an absolutely miserable member who's grown their business. So we look over the course of the year and like how many of the things that were on either their goal settings that we do in January or over the course of the year, the personal action summaries, did they actually accomplish? And kind of like, how are they feeling about themselves? There's a degree of success that I think we can influence. But I'm under no misguided idea that that's my responsibility or that, at the end of the day, they have to do it. I think there's a much larger, more holistic picture.
Beautiful. So, what about books? What's your top books that you refer most of the time, and why?
I'm a huge Ryan Holiday fan. So he's a stoic, talks a lot about stoicism. And I believe those principles are very valuable for everybody, including our members. And so he's got a bunch of books. My favorite of his is Stillness is the Key. And so I refer my members to that. I refer other people to that. I'm writing this book right now on inspiration. And so what we've found from a psychological perspective, we know inspiration by very nature is fleeting. But there are these 3 states of being that are more likely to produce a state of inspiration. And those 3 states are spaciousness, stillness, and self-forgetfulness. So those are the things so with Ryan's Stillness is the Key, I love that. That is one of my favorites. The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. And then in terms of other books, like The 4 Agreements, I think is really important for people. Like I like the general life books that are going, I think, to help people. For us as chairs, The Art of Gathering, I think, is beautiful. She's amazing. She's just amazing in general. Huge Brene fan, so I read a lot of Brene.
I'm going to steal from Brene for a minute since we mentioned her. What is one piece of leadership advice that you've been given that's so remarkable you need to share it with us, or so shitty you need to warn us? She does that on her podcast every time.
I love that. I think the greatest leadership lesson I ever learned the hard way is to get roadblocks out of the way. And I need to do that in a way that you understand. We tend to manage people and communicate with people in the way in which we like to be managed and communicated to. And I had a employee who grew up on South Side of LA, and she did not respond to general Socratic method coaching. She was very suspicious of it. She didn't like it. She wasn't producing for me. I called her old boss and he was like, well, how are you relating to her? And so I explained, and he's like, no, D, she is like a figurative hip check all the time. I brought her into my office and I was like, your results are totally shitty. They need to be fixed. You need to tell me what you need to do. And you know what? Night and day, it was so unnatural for me and felt so awkward. Is my intent to be right or to be heard? And so if my intent is to be heard, I need to tailor my tone, my messaging, my word, my language to a way in which you can hear it. And I do that with my members. I do that with everybody, right? And then in the moments where I get triggered or my hackles are up, I just have to remind myself, what's the intent here? Do you want to be right? Who is that helpful for? Makes you feel good for the first 30 seconds. So, like, what's yours?
Oh, what is my best piece of advice or a shitty piece of advice that I have to tell you to avoid? It's the mindset. And you touched on it at one point to say, it's not about you. I had the same imposter syndrome. Here I was a $3 million business. So it was my dad's business. Why are these people going to listen to me? And you know what? They didn't care about my story. I didn't need to blow it up. I didn't need to make it more than it needed to be. If I made the connection, if I showed up for them and listened, really listened, that was all that was important. And that's what I think our members need and what I think society looks for right now. It's just that connection, real, solid, caring connection. That doesn't mean you can't challenge. Much like you said, I ask my prospects and I say, okay, when you're uncomfortable, where do you feel it? I said, I feel it right here. This is where I feel it. Do you feel it here? Do you feel it in your back? Do you feel it in your gut? And that always makes that mind-body connection for them to say, yeah. And then so they'll tell me, and then I'll say, okay, well, if I don't make you feel that at least twice a year, I'm not doing my job. That feeling, not the, oh, I'm going to ask you to fire somebody, or that feeling of being really uncomfortable. I said, do you want that? Because if you want that, this is where you want to be. If you don't, that's okay too.
I love that. I love that. So I'm going to ask you one out of left field. Are you ready?
Cool. I'm ready.
What's been your greatest lesson in sharing?
Good question.
What's been your greatest learning as a chair?
I am valuable.
Tell me more.
I never felt like I could use the smarts that I had, but I didn't know where to use it for a greater good. My kids say, Mom, we've never seen you so happy when you're helping other people. And I always say, when I stopped in my business, I stopped measuring success in percentages and dollar signs and started measuring it in texts at holiday times, right? My husband's a teacher. He would always get 15, 20, 30 texts at Thanksgiving saying, Mr. Lasky, I loved you. You were so great. You totally taught me this, that, or the other thing. I was like, I want that as my KPI. And that's what I get now. And whether it's at Thanksgiving or whether it's at our Christmas party and people say nice things, it feeds my value. And then that feeds the inner critic in me that says, she's not good enough. She doesn't do anything well, right? And so I love that. I love that it's taught me fundamentally who I am. I've never been more myself than I am right now.
I love that. Like, that must feel so good, right?
Oh my God. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing even in the worst times, right? In the times like you had where, you're stressing about it. Oh, they're not going to think I'm a leader. I'm going to lose all my members, whatever that is. I can go back to going, no, you are where, even if all that happens, you are where you're supposed to be. This will all work out.
I love that.
So, yeah.
I think it's interesting. The only other thing that I'll say there is, like, sharing can have these really beautiful moments, but I also think it's a mirror for all your stuff.
Oh my God, yeah. Where do you see that happening?
Where, like, the mirror for me?
Yeah.
I mean, it pops up everywhere, right? So, like, I had this teacher long ago, a spiritual teacher, who used to say, like, you spot it, you got it, right? So I'm constantly telling my members, you're overcommitted, you need stillness, you need spaciousness. And then, who has, like, the biggest, fattest helium hand? Me. I have the biggest, fattest helium hand. As soon as I get that, like, Charlie Brown teacher, like, wah, 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 I realize, like, oh, it's mirror time. Oh, look, hey, that's actually me. Yay, right? So one of the beautiful unseen things that I did not know about sharing when I got in it is, like, it gives you an opportunity to heal a bunch of junk because it's all coming up.
Well, and you're exposed to them, right? Like, you're exposed to everybody else's phobias and, dreams. So of course it's going to come up for you. Anybody else's regular day, they don't have 40 people that they're talking to all day. I think therapists and us both have that as a bonus. All right. So the last question I'm going to ask you is, what is the similarities between the San Diego Padres and Vistage?
One of the beautiful things that this team had, which is why they succeeded until they didn't, was they had fun. baseball was not about wins and losses. It was like, if you look at Jackson Merrill, who is like our star rookie, Jackson Merrill would look right at somebody and say, I'm down at the ballpark every day playing with the thing I love to do with my brothers. That is what Vistage is. It is a cheering community that is like leaning in, doing the things that we love to do. We're having fun at it. That, I think, like that joy of the game, that's what Vistage is. That's what a good Vistage group feels like. That's what VCG feels like to me. It's what Chair World feels like. It's like this like exuberant passion for the game and the fact that we all recognize that like we get to play it. Like, how cool is that? Like, we get to do this every day. Like, it's amazing.
That was a beautiful answer. A great way to end. So I thank you for what you give to the Vistage community. I thank you what you've given to me. You and I have sat next to each other at various Chair World events and both rolled our eyes and cheered at the same time. And I have loved getting to know you and look forward to that continuing. So thank you for taking the time today.
Yes, I'm honored that you asked. So thank you.
Thank you. I am so thankful for Danielle's inspiration. I tried not only the 6 hats in my group this month, but I also experimented with taking a time out with my members. In true chair spirit, let's commit with a personal action summary. First, what surprised you in today's conversation? Second, where will you experiment with these new ideas? Third, who else needs this wisdom? And fourth, tag your commitment in LinkedIn and let's inspire each other's growth. You can find a transcript and show notes on my website at francinelasky.com. Who pulled out a chair for you? Who do you value in the Vistage community? We want to hear their story next. Nominate them by reaching out to us through my Vistage email, my website, or social media channels. Also, please tell other chairs in your VCG about this podcast and all the social media stuff like subscribe, comment, review us. It helps other chairs find us and strengthen our circle. With appreciation for the wisdom that we share, until next time, keep growing your chair impact.